I know most of you are probably like, Cross, the final shape launched a month ago, and you are just now putting together the pre and post testing for all exotic weapon changes since launch? How dare you? I know, my apologies. And I know some of you have probably already tested every single one of these, but we have gone and tested them ourselves. Now, something important to note before getting into this, normally our pre and post testing includes everything from exotics, weapons, to abilities, but unfortunately, there was a change that launched with the final shape, which makes this really not possible. You see, power went through a big overhaul, and now most activities have a set power level, and free roam destinations like Nessus have activity power disabled, meaning you're doing the same damage regardless of the overall power level, and regardless of weapon power level. But with this change, overall weapons are doing less damage than before against Carl and red bars, even with the buffs received. And for that reason, we are not able to do a one-to-one comparison on damage values. With that being said though, the main purpose of today's video is to go over exotic functionality and their changes, as some of these were greatly impacted. So to kick things off, we have Divinity. Bungie increased the number of shots required to generate the cage by 75% against combatants. Inside of PvP, this is unchanged. Now, pre-final shape, it took 8 shots to generate the cage. Post, it now takes 14 shots to generate that cage. Now, 6 more shots is definitely not anything that's going to kill this weapon, but yes, you are going to be consuming more ammo. Regardless though, folks are still using Divinity as it allows for easy crits. Now next we have Rat King. Bungie swapped the firing animation to the same one used by other auto fire sidearms. And this is kind of a subjective thing, but you can also see it. Pre-final shape, you would see it kick quite a bit when shot. The reticle could just get lost in the gun model itself, making it hard to track targets. Post final shape, that recoil and kick is not nearly as severe. It's easier to control, and you can actually see the reticle when you shoot, which is why we've had people come by the stream talking about Rat King inside of PvP. Next, we have Symmetry. Bungie gave some benefits to Symmetry's exotic catalyst. It now provides plus 10 reload speed, plus 10 handling, and they gave it the Eddy Current perk. Now, this is of course in addition to its existing effects. But pre-final shape, the catalyst used to only give that electric sticks perk that increase your dynamic charge stacks. Post though, the catalyst now gives you plus 10 reload speed. It also gives you that plus 10 in handling, which brings our handling stat to 46 and our reload speed to 25. Now, it also comes with the perk Eddy Current. This is something that ties directly into Arc, and Eddy Current itself got its own buff. It now takes 1.5 seconds of sprinting to activate instead of 3, and provides a bonus to handling and a 5% scalar on each stat at base. And being amplified will immediately activate this perk at its maximum effectiveness. For instance, with Eddy Current procced, it takes 11 frames to aim down sights with Symmetry and 48 frames to reload. While amplified and Eddy Current being procced, it takes 9 frames to aim down sights and 31 frames to reload. This just roughly gives you an idea of the kind of benefits that Eddy Current does present, especially in its reload. Next, we have Gjallarhorn. Updated the visuals of Wolfpack rounds to match the damage type of the weapon. Now, pre-final shape, Wolfpack rounds only had arc visuals. Post, Wolfpack rounds will now match your damage type. For instance, on Gjallarhorn, they're solo. If you're using a legendary rocket and you were given Wolfpack rounds, it will then match the element you are using. Now, obviously, this doesn't necessarily change the damage, but it is a nice little touch that I think many of us can appreciate. Now, touch of Malice. Increased duration of burn applied by the darkness ball against combatants from 2 to 3.5 seconds. Now, pre-final shape, the burn would only last for 2 seconds and would only tick for 4 times. Post, that burn now lasts for 3.5 seconds and will now tick for 7 times, which is pretty nice. Next, we have Osteo Striga. This now has a 4-second cooldown on the poison burst on kills. Now, keep in mind, the poison burst from sustained damage does not receive this cooldown. So pre-final shape, you used to be able to proc its poison burst freely on every kill. But yes, post, confirmed here guys, there is a 4-second cooldown between activations. Now there's no change on the poison burst or even the sustained damage. But yes, the overall proccing has definitely been nerfed. Now Necrochasm, a lot of changes here for Necro. The intrinsic perk now provides increased reload speed after precision kills. Also increases the duration of the burn applied by the Cursed Thrall explosion against combatants from 2 to 3.5 seconds. The catalyst itself was completely rebuilt. Its perk is now 1 for Thrall. Damaging 3 combatants in quick succession provides a period of increased damage, range, and aim assist. Now keep in mind guys, the pre-version of this catalyst was just Outlaw, which just gave us increased reload speed after getting a precision kill. And the burn from the Cursed Thrall explosion ticks here 4 times for 602 damage. Now post final shape, Outlaw has now been built into the weapon by default, as precision kills now give you increased reload speed. Now the Cursed Thrall explosion ticks here for 510 damage 7 times. Now 1 for Thrall is the new catalyst. Endless. And this works very similar to One for All. You see, at base against Carl, we're dealing 1,281 damage, and then when we proc One for Thrall, this jumps up 35% to 1,729, and this lasts for 10 seconds. Now we also get the extra benefits such as increased range, increased aim assist. We're not really sure how much aim assist this grants, but we did test this out inside of PvP, and essentially at base, we're hitting full damage up to 28 meters. But when we proc One for Thrall, this extends our range to 31 meters, which is very nice. Now the damage bonus also works inside of PvP, but the damage bonus is less. Our crit goes from 23 to 27, which is only a 17% increase in damage. Next, we have Lament. Bungie reduced the healing effect by 20%. They also stated that while the weapon does inherit the 7% global buff to swords, we've reduced the damage of the high end of the chained heavy attack by 20% from that point. This means combos at lower stacks are less affected by the change than combos at higher stacks. Now let's go over the restoration first. The amount of HP restored on hit pre-final shape was about 8 HP. This has been toned down just slightly to now 6 HP. Now as far as the combos themselves, keep in mind that these damage numbers are less than the 20% nerf it was supposed to be, and that's because of everything changing with the final shape. It's not a perfect one-to-one comparison. With that being said though, these are still our damage values against Carl. So pre-final shape at ×9, that being 3 line attacks and then the heavy attack, this was 140,947 damage. Post, this has dropped to 102,224 damage. Now at ×7, this being 2 line attacks first and then the heavy attack, pre it was 141,304 damage. However, post, this has dropped to 111,374 damage. One thing to take note of is that it's not as big of a decrease, and in this case, ×7 is doing more than ×9. Now pre-final shape at ×4 with 1 light attack first and the heavy attack being second was 94,203. Post, this is 85,673 damage. So you can see where that margin gets closer and closer, pretty much aligning itself to the change that they made in the patch notes, where they reduced the damage of the high end of the chained heavy attack by 20%. I think there's going to be more emphasis on just going for the 1-1, the 1 light attack and the 1 heavy with Lament, and at most 2 light attacks and a heavy. Which I'm going to be honest guys, I was already doing that combo to begin with. Now I'm just going to commit to the 1-1. Next we have Dead Man's Tale. Now Bungie did a host of things to DMT. Cranial Spike and its stacks now grant stability in addition to the aim assist stats and range, this being +2 per stack. They also increased reload speed benefits of those Cranial Spike stacks. Now with the Catalyst, while hip firing, they slightly reduced the accuracy benefits. They also increased the magnetism fall-off scale from 1.6 to 1.7, but they increased the baseline rate of fire from 130 rounds per minute to 140 rounds per minute. Now they removed the PvE only damage buff that scaled with the stack of Cranial Spike and added a 15% damage bonus at maximum stacks of Cranial Spike. Now pre-final shape, Cranial Spike only granted aim assist and range, and at ×5 this would be +40 range and +20 aim assist. Now if you were to break this down by frames, at ×5 it took 41 frames to load a shot with the reload speed increase. The Catalyst will remove hipfire accuracy penalties and increase the rate of fire, which was 130 rounds per minute. Now post final shape, Cranial Spike now grants +2 stability per stack, and at ×5 this gives you +40 range, +20 aim assist, and +10 stability. This also means at ×5 it takes 36 frames to load a shot with the new reload speed increase. Now with the Catalyst and while hip firing, they slightly reduce the accuracy benefits and increase magnetism fall off scale. Personally guys, I've been using DMT a little bit inside of PvP and it feels great, even with the pullback on the accuracy. Now with the Catalyst, the hip fire is now 140 rounds per minute, and you see Bungie slowly walking back those previous Dead Man Tale nerfs. Now inside of PvP, we finally get that damage buff. The max stacks is a 15% damage buff, taking our crits here from 92 damage per crit to 105 damage per crit, and also increasing our body shot damage from 55 to 63. This essentially allows Guardians to be killed in 1 crit 2 body on anyone tier 9 resilience and below. Now mathematically, it's supposed to also get the kill on tier 10 resilience Guardians, but for my other folks that have been testing this, we're not quite hitting it, as we're not able to achieve that 1 crit 2 body, and I'm assuming there's some level of rounding here. Next we have the Colony. This now spawns additional insectoid robots on final blows. More robots, up to 5, spawn from tougher combatants. Now pre-final shape, Colony only spawned insectoid robots from the grenade launcher itself. No additional ones spawned from the final blow. But post though, it works like it says. Red bar enemies, for instance, will spawn 1 insectoid robot on kill. Orange bar enemies will spawn 2, and mini bosses and higher will actually spawn 5 insectoid robots on kill. It's kind of fun to see all these little things running around getting kills, but keep in mind, guys, they're not really that strong. They're only dealing like 31,857 damage here to Carl. Now, truth. Somebody at Bungie really wants us to use truth. Bungie increased the area of effect damage such that it doesn't lose noticeable damage due to not dealing impact damage. They also increased the total reserves by 3. Now, pre, we were dealing 93,636 damage with a base reserve of 9 and could be increased to 11 with reserve mods. Post. Now it does 87,309 damage, but the base reserves are now 12, with reserve mods kicking it up to 14. Keep in mind, guys, the damage here is only different because of the sandbox changes pre to post. The main takeaway for this is that this is overall a net buff for truth. You are holding a ton of rockets. The fact that you can hold 14 rockets here is insane. Will anybody use it in PvE? Probably not. Now, Queenbreaker's bow. Bungie increased the damage versus bosses, mini bosses, champions, and vehicles by 12%. They also increased reserve ammunition by 3. Now keep in mind, guys, Queenbreaker's bow has 2 different firing modes. It's got its marksman sights and its combat sights. Marksman being the slower firing but heavy hitter linear shot, whereas combat is that super fast shot. Now again, like I said, you can't really trust these damage values because it looks like it was a nerf across the board, but that's not the case. These are just sandbox changes, and we've sat down and did damage testing with Queenbreaker's bow. The biggest thing that hinders it in the landscape of linear fusions is really just stopping to reload the weapon too often, especially if you're using combat sights. This is that point when we need an exotic catalyst for Queenbreaker's bow with like 4 times the charm or even triple tap, something to just help out with the ammo there. Next we have Cerberus. Focus fire now will activate on special reloads following a kill and will no longer reduce range or rate of fire. Now pre-final shape, you could activate focus fire at any time. Literally just spawn, hold down your reload, boom, it's now activated. But you had substantially less range and reduced rate of fire. This was essentially like shotgun range. Post though, you need to get a kill to activate focus fire. And you could tell when it's ready when the lights on the side of the weapon glow green. And you have 7.5 seconds to activate its special reload. Once activated though, this will refill the magazine and it gives you the focus fire buff, which lasts for 8 seconds. The timer is refreshed by getting kills. Now, while in focus fire mode, your shots do a whopping 50% increase in damage. Now, for those unaware, Cerberus has reverse damage fall off. It does less damage the closer you are, but eventually will start to fall off like normal auto rifles and then do less damage. This is one of the things that's kind of a subjective thing, guys. My only aggravation with it is that I feel the focus fire buff just doesn't last long enough. Like I'm thinking 10, maybe 11 seconds would be better for this weapon. Next, we have Bastion. Bungie has reworked the Saint's Fist perk. Dealing damage with melees increases your charge rate, your damage, and your reload speed for a short duration. Landing a majority of pellets in a burst increases melee damage. This is very unique, guys. You don't see changes like this often. It's almost like 1-2 punch, but for a fusion rifle. But at the same time, it's like trench barrel. Now, pre-final shape, the entire point of Bastion before was that it was a kinetic fusion rifle that did decent damage and it can stun unstoppable champions. Post though, Saint's perk is pretty interesting. It is that combo of 1-2 punch and trench barrel with a few extra benefits. Doing damage with any melee though, including power melees, will trigger Saint's Fury, which lasts for 8.5 seconds. And this will grant you 45% increased damage, taking your fusion pellets from 3,587 to 5,187. And this can also be refreshed by dealing damage with another melee. Now, as for our charge rate, keep in mind this is in frames, but you could do the conversion yourselves based on the charge rate. But it would take 49 frames to charge at base. With the perk procced, this takes it to 42 frames. Now, we had some questions the other day on how these frames work. It's in 60 FPS, guys. It's through Premiere Pro. You could do the conversions yourselves. Just take base frames over charge time equals procced frames over X, and then just solve for X. In this situation, it would be somewhere around 668 to 669 charge rate with this perk being procced. Now, when you land the majority of your pellets with Bastion, this will trigger Saint's Fist. Now, this lasts for 2.7 seconds, and this will grant your melees a whopping 100% damage bonus, which is pretty wild. You can see it right here, guys. Our base melee goes from 8,685 damage to 17,370. Now, this seems to work exactly like 1-2 punch, as there are only certain melees that will work. Now, for the melees that do not work, proximity explosive knives, snare bombs, Tempest Strike, Withering Blade, Threaded Spike. We also have Throwing Hammer, Consecration, Thunderclap, Shield Throw, Fletched Storm. And for my warlocks, everything except Chain Lightning. Overall, though, guys, I love the rework done to Bastion here. And it kind of makes sense considering the season that we're in right now, or the episode that we're in, is very much centered around Saint. Next, we have Eriana's Vow. Breaking a match shield or piercing a champion's barrier will cause the target to ignite. Now, pre-final shape, there was no 3.0 synergy with Solar. Post, though, we have it. It now has Solar synergy. It will cause an ignition when you break a barrier champion shield or when you break a Solar shield. This is a very nice addition here to Eriana's Vow. Next, we have Deterministic Chaos. This weapon is now intrinsically anti-barrier. Now, the heavy metal and Vexadecimal perks have had their locations and behavior swapped though. For instance, the heavy metal now causes every 4th bullet to make targets volatile, and Vexadecimal now causes every 16th bullet to now weaken targets. Now, pre-final shape, these were of course reverse. Every 4th shot would actually weaken targets, and every 16th shot would make targets volatile. In my opinion, the post version of this just makes more sense. You've got something to help with ad clear, and then you could turn the weaken effect on for those meteor targets. And keep in mind, this will also stun barrier champions now as well. Now, Hardlight, Borealis, and Dead Messenger. The fundamentals now maintain its state across death or respawn. Now, pre-final shape, one of the most annoying aspects about these weapons is, of course, if you die, you would respawn with your element changing. For instance, Hardlight, if you died, upon respawn, it would automatically go back to Void. Post, though, when you die, whatever element you had actually swapped your weapon to, it will remain that element when you resurrect. I know this is a small, subtle thing, but it's a good quality of life improvement to these weapons. Now, finally, Bungie reduced the splash damage by 10% on the following weapons: Sunshot, Trinity Ghoul, Polaris Lance, and Graviton Lance. And this is very, very tough to test considering we don't have a 1-to-1 damage comparison sandbox to sandbox. But keep in mind, guys, this is a very small nerf. These exotics are still very, very good. The splash damage from Sunshot is 8,782 against Coral. Trinity Ghoul is 3,643. Polaris Lance is 7,645. Graviton Lance is a whopping 13,471. The point is, these weapons have always been great weapons when it comes to ad clearing, and they're still fantastic even in the current sandbox. I would say the biggest things that have contributed to Polaris Lance falling off, even though I do personally use it from time to time, is that we don't have mods like Flint Striker. The artifact mods last year were so heavily built for solar, and especially solar weapons that could scorch targets. Polaris Lance had the ability to self-ignite over and over. But who knows? We've got Acts 2 and Acts 3 of this episode, and with each one of those acts, Bungie will be presenting new artifact mods. So hopefully, we might see Flint Striker in the future. With that being said, guys, those are your exotic changes pre versus post. I hate the damage values have changed like this, but going forward, we should be good. Sometimes pre versus post, when it comes to annual expansions, there's big shakeups in the sandbox, but season to season, or in this case, episode to episode, those pre-damage values should carry over no problem. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.